Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today we're talking about some overrated albums from the 90s. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you see a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. All right, so we try to stay kind of positive-ish on the channel here. But we've done overrated albums of, the 70s. We've done the 60s. The 60s I thought were pretty hard. So today we're going to talk about what we think are some overrated albums of the 90s. I will say that this was actually a harder list for me to put together than any other list. Because I think the 90s were so... Diverse, I guess is the way I want to say it. Yeah. It was such a diverse decade musically.
Plus, it was our generations. I mean, that was our... We're going to react to those albums differently because we were teenagers.
Yes, we were teenagers when those albums came out. I will say that at least the albums I'm going to talk about, I know that Ian does not feel this way about the albums he's going to talk about, but all the albums I've got to talk about, I think they're good albums. I just think they're not maybe as great as a lot of people.
I feel that way about a couple of mine.
Do you? There's a couple I know you absolutely hate.
There's going to be a couple that I'm going to be trying very hard not to be cruel.
Yeah. So I will say that I'll probably get some hate about the first pick. I enjoy this album, but I have never understood why it gets all the hype that it gets. And that is OK Computer by Radiohead. Like I said, I think this is a good album. Paranoid Android is a great track. There's some other great tracks on here. I think that largely, I will say there's large sections of this album that I think are pretty forgettable. And I think that's kind of why I've always kind of knocked it out of peg. And I picked this up right. Yeah, I think Paranoid Android got really popular before this album came out, I believe. Or it was right around the time that album got released. And that's why I picked up this album, because I love that song. And then when I listened to it, I was like, well, okay, there's a track here or there I like, but like musically, it's a Radiohead album. It's not the Bends, which I think is probably, at least in my opinion, that and Pablo Honey, I think are their best two albums. And maybe that's kind of why I look at it with kind of a negative light.
Well, this is a huge transitional album for the band because it, like you said, it's not like the albums that came before, and it really kind of set the trajectory for what the albums after were going to become. Yeah. And amongst the Radiohead collective, it's a collection, really. I can see it being kind of their masterpiece within their
people
collection.
Look at OK Computer as like the Dark Side of the Moon of the 90s. Yeah, and I don't get that.
It's the Dark Side of the Moon, maybe amongst the Radiohead catalog.
Well, I'm saying like they look at this album as like this progressive masterpiece. Right. The same way they talk about the Dark Side of the Moon, which I don't even consider a progressive album. But
I don't either.
That's why I said they look at this as the Dark Side of the Moon of the 90s.
Right. And like I said, I mean, amongst the Radiohead collection, I can see that, or catalog. But there's a lot of people out there who go back and forth on whether or not this is that album or Kid A is that album. So... Yeah. If the fans can't even agree, then I can see it not necessarily being that huge, that zenith of 90s rock or 90s music. Yeah. So the first one is one that I'm going to be harsh with because I don't like this band. Celebrity Skin by Hole.
This is my copy because I think this is a good album.
All of the albums that I show you are his copies. Yes. I don't own any of these albums. I don't like Hole. I don't like Courtney Love. I never have. Even before I thought what conspiracy theorists think may have happened. Yeah. I didn't like her then. And people like this album. I get it. It was rated high on a list that I looked at. Not high, but within 100. I wouldn't put this in 1,000.
So I think what I like about this album is Live Through This is, I kind of look at it as like one of those kind of, I don't really consider it a grunge album, but a lot of people look at it as like a grunge staple as far as like female music goes in the 90s. Live Through This is a great album, I think, at least in my opinion. And what I like about Celebrity Skin, it was a progression in their music. They broke away. Music by the time this album came out, music was very different. You know, rock music had progressed and changed, and they kind of followed the trends. And it's a little bit more poppier, it's a little more polished than Live Through This. You know, I don't think it's as good of an album, but I still really enjoy a lot of the music on it. I know you.
I don't like Hole. If I want a grungy, female-led band, I'm gonna listen to L7.
Yeah, there's one album that I picked that I know Ian will, you know, die on this cross. That it's a great album. I don't think it is.
I'm not gonna. It's not the hill I'm gonna die on.
No,
or
okay.
Cross. It's not one I'm gonna die on.
So,
but I'm gonna disagree with you.
I think Pinkerton by Weezer is a vastly overrated album. I don't think it's nearly as good as anything else that they released in the 90s. You know, it's an album that I think is largely forgettable.
So,
especially when I compare it to like the Blue Album, which I think is the Blue Album, and I think the Green Album are like their masterpieces. And then, like I said, Pinkerton, I think in comparison to those albums, I just don't see it.
So for me, I see Pinkerton as the next logical step after the Blue Album. I don't know.
Logical step down.
No, next logical step, because if you say their first 4 Weezer albums, I'm not saying that they're huge steps up, because they're not. I don't think the Green Album is as good as the Blue Album, but I think Pinkerton is kind of unique in the first 4 Weezer albums, which are arguably they're 4 good ones. In those first 4, Pinkerton is it's a transitional album. You can't really take it song by song and compare it song by song to the song by song on the other albums. As a whole, as a package,
I just think as a whole, as a package, it's largely forgettable. It sounds like, to me, a lot of songs that were written for other albums and just weren't good enough to be on those other albums.
So this one, I am not a fan of this band.
But you're not a fan of this genre of music either. But
not terribly, no. But I can appreciate it to a degree. And I don't have the vitriol with this band that I have with some of the bands that are going to be coming, with Hole specifically, but one other band that'll be coming near the end. And it's Korn. It's their debut album.
Yep.
Korn. I don't get it. I don't. The songs are fine. It's musically it's fine. It's new metal, whatever. It came out at a time when like Marilyn Manson was doing his thing, and
Marilyn Manson.
It's different, I know.
Marilyn Manson was a little more like industrial,
right? But I mean, there's industrial elements to this too.
Nah, this is pretty much just a straightforward new metal.
New metal, yeah.
I don't think there's a bad song on that album. Their debut album to me is the definitive Korn album.
But see and that's probably why.
And I'm not even a big Korn fan.
I'm not a Korn fan. I don't, like I said, I don't get it. It's not. I don't know why. I mean, maybe because I appreciate the old metal. It's not that I think that new metal is bad. I don't like it, but I just don't get it. I don't get the what it's trying to say. I just don't get it, and I don't.
I think
as a result of that, I can't consider this a great album, and people do. And I mean, it put Korn on the map, and I just don't.
I think this album really kind of changed where, like, heavier music in the middle part of the 90s was going.
Yeah.
And it was a time period where heavier rock was going more industrial. And when Korn came on the scene with this album, it shifted that focus and pushed it in a different direction. This was at least in the mainstream, a groundbreaking album for heavier music in the middle part of the decade. I think it's a great album. I think it's their hands down the best album that Korn ever released.
So let me ask you this. I know 9 Inch Nails is considered more industrial.
Yes.
But what is Korn doing other than that slight difference in genre?
It's a very different style.
Yes, but like conceptually. Not musically, but conceptually.
Well, I mean, I guess you can say that about lots of different, similar-ish subgenres.
Because I was going to say, if you look at it on a conceptual level, I think 9 Inch Nails does it better.
Yeah, I'm not a 9 Inch Nails fan either.
I'm not either, but I'm just saying.
I think 9 Inch Nails had one good album, but...
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, I think if you look at it on a conceptual level, I think 9 Inch Nails does it better. I think conceptually.
Well, I mean,
Marilyn
but
Manson does it better.
You're comparing apples to oranges there, though, because they're very different subgenres.
Perhaps. I don't get it. So this is one that I don't hate this. I just don't like it. It's Hootie and the Blowfish. Cracked review. I don't like the band.
I think your issue with this is you've never been like a big like pop rock kind of guy, and it's this kind of pop rock that I don't think you've ever been a big fan of, because this is definitely more on like the poppier side of, like if you think about it, I'm gonna take the plastic sleeve off this what you're talking about.
So, well, that being said, I can dig some Dave Matthews Band songs. I'd say they're in the same category. Yeah. I just don't like.
There was more of like a poppy kind of vibe, I think, to Darius Rucker's voice, and I think that maybe that's what. Because I know you've never ever liked this album.
It's not that I hate it though. I don't know. It just doesn't do anything for me.
The reason why I don't think this is an overrated album is because I don't really think it's all that highly rated. I know I think
it was huge when it came out.
Of course it was.
I mean, it was like everywhere.
Yeah, but I think like in retrospect, people looking back, 30 years on after this album came out, I think there's a couple of tracks like "Hold My Hand" that people obviously love.
That's what I was trying to think of. I'm like,
but like outside of like those big hits, I think there are some like sleeper tracks on this album that I think make it an okay album. But like I said, going back and looking at it, I don't think people like hold this up as like a pinnacle of pop rock. In the
one
90s.
list I looked at, this was in the top 50.
As like best 90s albums?
Out of 200, yeah. I would top 50.
I wouldn't put that in the top 50. Maybe
I don't know if I'd put it in the top 200, to be honest with you. I don't know. It's not bad. It's just, I
guess with my next selection, I will say that I guess I'll preface this by saying that I am a big Sublime fan. I love their self-titled album. I think it's one of the, ska, punk, whatever you want to classify them as. I think it's one of the pinnacles of that genre in the 90s. But the album that came out before that, I might have it on CD. I don't have it on vinyl. It's 40 Ounces of Freedom. It's kind of held up in the same light as their self-titled album. And while it does have a couple of good tracks on it, it kind of, I don't know if it like falls under like some of it kind of has like a stonerish kind of feel to it. I don't think it really worked really well on that with Sublime's music or their music style. But like, I think it's okay. But it's just nowhere close to what they did, obviously, with their self-titled album. But people, like I said, people hold that up in kind of the same light. I know Vinyl Me Please just did a reissue of it recently, and it like sold out in seconds. I wasn't going to try and grab a copy of it, but just because I do want to have it on vinyl. But yeah, like I said, I see it as kind of just slightly overrated album.
I can't comment. I don't really know Sublime's music that well.
No. I will say that's kind of the thing that's always kind of interesting on these videos is we have very different musical interests, I think. So we typically come
we have similar music tastes, but we have a lot of divergent sub-tastes.
If you're looking at the Venn diagram, yes, there is some overlap in the middle, but I think there's a lot of outliers also.
There is, absolutely. So my next one, this is another one. I do not hate this album. I just don't love this album, and I think it's kind of overrated.
I think it's one of the probably top 25 albums of the 90s.
I think it was in the top 25 of that list. I could be wrong.
I would definitely put that album there.
I have no problem with poppy or rock. I really don't. I mean, maybe the Hootie and the Blowfish might be a little too far to that side, but I mean, Counting Crows falls under that category in the early 90s too.
Yeah, not to that same extent. I think like with Hootie and the Blowfish, there's definitely a lot more of a poppy vibe.
I don't know. I think Mr. Jones has played way more than Hold My Hand. But for this, I don't know. Maybe I feel that way about Sheryl Crow in general. Like, she's fine. She's talented. Her songs are all right. But
I think some of her other albums are maybe slightly overrated. I think what makes Tuesday Night Music Club an incredible album are the non-hits on there. It's the deeper cuts on the album, I think, that really make this a really good album. I don't remember what the name of the opening track is.
Run Baby Run.
Yeah, but it has this like there are folkier elements to this album that aren't so. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe people look at this album and remember like the big poppy ear kind of hits on there. and maybe don't know some of the deeper tracks, some of the folkier kind of tracks on that album, I think make it one of the top 25 albums of the 90s.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's overrated.
Well, that's all we got for today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of insane comments
Bring it on.
Some of the albums I pick. I know a lot of people love OK Computer, and that's one I know there'll be some comments on. But love to know what you guys think. Also, throw out what you guys think are some overrated albums of the 90s. Love to know what your guys' opinions are on those. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you see a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.